This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in. But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us. You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest up for now. Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? At the same time, I feel pity for these in-laws. In our apartment, one of the in-laws was staying over. As their condition improved, we decided it was time for them to go home. Why did it come to this? Let me tell you the reason. My name is Chloe. I'm in my mid-30s. I used to work in an office near my parents' home. Our family consists of 3 people. First, my husband, Matthew. He worked long hours as a sales representative for a well-known company. He's in his late 30s, 3 years older than me, and we're both approaching our 40s. And we have a daughter, Zoe. A sweet, clingy little girl who is more attached to me than to her father. I grew up as an only child and always longed for siblings. Oops, I borrowed my sister's clothes. Or, I'm hiding this so my brother won't take it. I used to envy such casual remarks from my friends. I didn't want Zoe to have such longings, so I aimed to be not just a mom but also a sister or a friend she could talk to about anything. Zoe seems to understand that and really loves her mom. Recently, as Zoe turned 3 and became more attached to me, I started longing for another child, a sibling for her. My husband agreed with my thoughts and encouraged us to try together. Last year-end, we found out I was pregnant with our second child during a checkup. We were both overjoyed. It was a long-awaited event, and above all, I was delighted imagining Zoe's happy face. But I realized we had a problem to consider. Taking care of 2 children meant double the parenting work. It was impossible to look after a still young Zoe, deal with a baby, and work at the same time. So, I decided to focus on parenting. I discussed it with my husband and decided to quit my job. But there was an issue with our living space. We lived in a cramped apartment, which would feel even smaller as the children grew. We couldn't just expand our rented apartment as we wished. I talked to my husband. What about the kids' room? Here, as a kid's room. He seemed to think it was impossible. I thought so too. That's true. His opinion was only natural. Our conversation ended there for the time being. But it wasn't a problem that could just be left unresolved. I always thought about one solution. We should move. I had long wanted to move. But even if we started looking right away, would we find a place that satisfied our family? After some discussions, we decided to build a new house. This way, we could have as many rooms as we wanted and, in the future, turn them into the kids' rooms. However, neither my husband nor I knew anything about construction. While pondering what to do, my husband had an idea. Why don't we talk to Dad and Mom? His words surprised me. At the same time, the faces of those 2 popped into my mind, and I got goosebumps without realizing it. My husband's parents, my in-laws, live in another state. I heard that my father-in-law has been working in air conditioning since his youth. He's done work not just for office buildings, but also for private new constructions. It's true that they have more knowledge in this area than we do. I can't blame my husband for relying on them. Moreover, my mother-in-law has a similar background, and my FIL is the head of a small air conditioning company. Ever since we got married, I haven't gotten along well with my in-laws. There are various reasons for this. For instance, there was this time we went shopping together. I don't like to waste money. When I make expensive purchases, I check the price, online reviews, compare it with similar products for functionality, and then buy only if I'm satisfied. But the in-laws are different. That day, we went to a department store, and MIL stopped in front of a shop. I want this. She suddenly spoke in a whiny voice, like a little girl begging my FIL. She was looking at an expensive bag from a famous brand. Which one? Let's see. After looking at it for a while, FIL went inside the shop. Wait a minute. I tried to stop them, but it seemed like they were intentionally ignoring me. They quickly picked out and bought items without properly checking the prices. We'll buy some for you too. She said this and picked out several items on her own. However, they weren't really to my taste, even if they were luxury goods. No, I'm fine, thank you. What are you saying? You're just being shy because it's expensive, right? That's part of it, but just accept it, it's a rare opportunity. I refused multiple times. Most people would be happy, but coming from Maëlle, it felt like she was forcing me. FIL then frowned. What's the problem? You don't like me buying for you? That's right. She doesn't like the items I choose. Here we go again. I hate being made to feel indebted. I really am fine, thank you. Come on, just accept it. My husband didn't stop them. In fact, he seemed to encourage it. I prefer to compare and choose on my own. You think you have such a good eye for comparison? This comment infuriated me. I wanted to get angry, but arguing in the store would be pointless, so I talked to the clerk and chose the cheapest wallet. But I haven't used it since I don't feel like it. This is how different my in-laws and I are. Even if we try to discuss things, we never reach a conclusion. I would prefer to live without seeing the in-laws if possible. So please, spare me. If I bring up this topic, they'll inevitably suggest living together. In fact, this issue came up before. Ultimately, my husband respected my opinion, and we didn't go through with it. I made it clear to him that we should never live together. A few days later, I started dealing with a contractor I found myself. The budget was more than I expected, but I was excited about getting the layout I wanted. However, I had to stop the arrangements with the contractor because something happened. Suddenly, I felt ill and had to be rushed to the hospital. The tests showed severe anemia. Due to my pregnancy, I was advised to rest and had to be hospitalized. It's important to take care of my health. But I'm worried about how my husband will handle things while I'm in the hospital. He might call the in-laws. And I'm also concerned about Zoe. She must feel lonely since I was suddenly hospitalized. No matter how much I thought about various things, I couldn't take any action. I had to focus on treatment, feeling frustrated. But later, I learned that my worries had become reality. As expected, my husband called the in-laws while I was hospitalized and explained the situation. The in-laws, seizing the opportunity without my permission, went ahead and discussed the new house construction with the contractor. During this time, Zoe had to live with my husband and the in-laws. But like me, she seemed to dislike the in-laws and didn't warm up to them. My husband said that probably because I wasn't there, Zoe became very scared. She cried many times, even though my husband tried to comfort her. 2 weeks later, I was discharged and my husband and Zoe came to pick me up. Zoe burst into tears of joy when she saw me. Then, when I got home, the in-laws were having a meeting with the contractor. Stay calm. Don't overdo it, you're pregnant. They said these things to me with a smile. But I thought their concern was just a pretense while I watched them. The next day, the in-laws showed me the floor plan for the property, and sure enough, it was completely different from what I had planned. Hey, this is different from the layout I thought of. I felt it was futile, but I asked my husband about it anyway. Really? I think it's fine. But the previous one seemed more livable. Dad has seen many properties because of his job. It's safe to leave it to him. As expected, my husband didn't take it seriously. I knew it was futile, but I talked to the in-laws anyway. Please don't do anything on your own while I'm away. My plea was met with a displeased look from Maëlle. She whispered something to Fael, and he stiffened. This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in. But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us. You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest for now. Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? I was angry, and at the same time, I began to pity these in-laws. For a while, one of the in-laws was staying at our apartment room, but as my condition improved, I decided it was time for them to go home. Once they were gone, I could take the lead again and focus on the new house, progressing the work that had stalled. So, I resumed my discussions with the contractor. But something felt off. I asked for a bay window here. That's not possible. Every time I met with the contractor, they became more reluctant. This was unexpected. Wondering why, I called the contractor persistently. All right, I'll explain. Finally, the contractor gave in to my insistence and explained. According to him, the reluctance was due to the in-laws' involvement. Apparently, right after returning to their home, they called the contractor and instructed him to be uncooperative with my requests, and to follow only their instructions. How much more do they intend to belittle me? I checked with my husband, but he remained clueless. He claimed ignorance about the in-laws' actions. It was the same response over and over. His attitude seemed suspicious. But with no one to consult, I had to bear the problem alone. A week later, I received a call from someone. As we talked, I arranged to meet this person. We decided to meet at a cafe, and I waited for a safe time when my husband and the in-laws wouldn't notice to leave the house. Sitting at a window-side table, the woman I was meeting quickly spotted me and invited me to join her. It's been a while. Have you been well? It's been 3 years. The woman I was meeting with was my sister-in-law, Olivia. Olivia is about 10 years older than me. She is frank, speaks her mind, and doesn't shy away from things. A successful career woman, she's someone I've always admired. We ordered coffee, and after taking a few sips, I started the conversation. I couldn't talk over the phone, but what is it about? Today, it's not about us. It's about you and your family. What do you mean? I couldn't understand her words for a moment. What could be the issue about us? Did we cause a problem or inconvenience to someone? While I pondered, the matter with Chloe's dad came to mind. Is it about Chloe's dad and them? She sighed deeply and nodded. That's when I learned why the in-laws were so proactive about our new house construction. According to Olivia, the in-laws planned to sell their current home and live with my husband. Initially, they wanted to live with Olivia and her siblings in the neighboring town, considering their old age. However, Olivia had refused this idea. She, too, didn't get along well with the in-laws. It wasn't just a matter of not getting along. Her straightforward nature was something the in-laws disliked. After being firmly rejected by Olivia, both were irate and learned of my husband's plans to build a new house. Quickly, the in-laws secretly communicated with my husband and started planning to live together. My husband intended to have me return to work soon after giving birth and eventually take care of the two of them. In return, the in-laws would give the money from selling their house to my husband. After telling me everything, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Olivia apologized. It's okay. Please, lift your head. I don't know the details, but this feels like a crime. A crime? Isn't that a bit over the top? Olivia shook her head. Just then, her phone alarm went off. Sorry, but I have to go. I've got work." She handed me some money and hurried out of the cafe. Is what she told me true? If so, what should I do? I was troubled. Even if I confront my husband with the truth, it would be futile. It would be even less meaningful to the in-laws. After much thought, I decided not to intervene despite knowing the full picture. The due date for my delivery was approaching. I had planned to return to my parents' house for the birth. I was going to take Zoe back home with me and leave the rest to my husband. After moving back to my parents' house, the new home was completed. 5 days after the new house was ready, I started having contractions and had to be hospitalized for childbirth. Unlike with Zoe, it was a difficult delivery, but thanks to the doctor's appropriate care, I gave birth safely. After the hospital, I spent a month at my parents' house for recuperation. Once I felt better, I left the children with my parents and went to our home alone. I wondered about the progress of the move. I had assumed it was somewhat complete. But in reality, my husband and the in-laws had done nothing, probably expecting me to handle it. They seemed to have been eagerly waiting for my return. The in-laws and my husband were chatting happily. I took my husband aside into another room. "What's this all about?" "I told you I don't want to live together." While clicking his tongue, my husband muttered under his breath, "What? If you have something to say, say it." Maybe this triggered him. His expression changed. "I'm living with them. If you don't like it, leave." "So, you won't give it up?" "Yeah, I won't. I'll give you custody of Zoe and them, okay?" "Don't say such unreasonable things." "I don't care. Just do your best." But as a housewife, that's probably impossible. Seeing my husband's attitude, which was a complete reversal from when we first got married, I felt disgusted. "Understood. So, is this okay?" I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and handed it to my husband. It was a divorce application. I had struggled with the decision because of Zoe and the newborn baby. But it seemed pointless to continue arguing without any resolution in sight. While at my parents' house, I had gone to the office, gotten the divorce papers, and already signed them. My husband, suddenly presented with the papers, looked slightly shaken. "Hey, is this for real?" "Deadly serious. I'll pack my things and leave." With a resolve I had never shown before, I communicated my decision to my husband and then returned to my parents' house. Eventually, I moved all my belongings to my parents' house, and in exchange, the in-laws moved into the new house I was supposed to live in. With everything that had happened, I never set foot in it. What follows is what I heard from my sister-in-law Olivia and others who knew about the in-laws. After I started living again at my parents' house, the in-laws attempted to sell their old house through a real estate agency. But the house, lived in for many years, had holes and cracks in various walls. The kitchen and bathroom fans and faucets were rusted, and the house was slightly tilted. In other words, the house was severely aged. Such a condition meant no buyers. The price offered by the real estate agency was low. It seemed like a dream to build an ideal home, but in reality, with just my husband's income, they struggled with payments. Even with the in-laws working, the salary was barely enough for the three of them to live on. The house became neglected and soon didn't look like a new property. I received several calls from my husband and the in-laws, but I ignored them all. Naturally, there was no reason for me to help them. Years later, they desperately asked the real estate agency to sell the house for whatever they could get. They returned to the local area, but not to a single-family home. I heard from Olivia that they were living modestly in a cheap apartment. After giving birth to my second child, I spent a year living with my parents. But now, things are different. A colleague from the company where I used to work introduced me to several job interviews. I was offered a position in one of them. It's not a luxurious life. But I have my children and my parents. Even without a husband, I feel I can live happily. You're nothing but a useless parasite. Get out of your parents' house now. As I was moving down the hallway in my wheelchair, I was suddenly confronted by my brother's wife, Angela. Thinking it was just her usual harassment, I pretended not to hear. But then, she stood in front of me, blocking my way. Next thing I knew, I felt like I was floating, followed by a jolt of pain. Ouch! Angela had suddenly pushed me and my wheelchair to the floor. I felt a sharp pain in my arm and ended up crawling on the floor. Then, with a pleased smile, she kicked my wheelchair out of my reach. Why are you doing this to me? You're in the way. I'm not giving back your wheelchair until you agree to leave your parents' house. Angela always looked down on me, treating me horribly without remorse. At that moment, I realized I could never understand her and decided to leave the house I had grown up in. Now this big house and all its wealth are mine. Angela's face lit up with a devilish grin, delighted by the situation. At that moment, I vowed revenge against the truly terrifying Angela, who seemed willing to do anything for her own desires. I am Margaret, 33 years old. 3 years ago, on a rainy day, I fell down the stairs at the station. The fall caused a spinal injury, leaving me paraplegic, dependent on my wheelchair. When I first realized I couldn't move my legs, I cried tears of frustration. But now, I've accepted my reality and have adapted to work from home, doing what I can. I've always lived in my parents' house, which was remodeled 2 years ago to be wheelchair accessible. Being self-conscious, I mostly stay indoors. In my family home, I also live with my brother Kevin and his wife Angela, who married a year ago. Angela, my brother's wife, is 3 years older than me. I was initially excited to have Angela like a real sister, but that was a big mistake. The day Angela moved in, after unpacking, she smiled at me sweetly and asked in a gentle voice, "Now that we're living together, I'd love to have a heart-to-heart in your room to get along better, Margaret." I'd love that. I really want to be friends with you, Angela. With high hopes for a pleasant future, I entered my room with Angela pushing my wheelchair. But as soon as the door closed, her kind expression vanished. She frowned like a different person and said something shocking. "You know, you're an eyesore." "Excuse me. Are your ears as bad as your legs? Your presence in that wheelchair is an eyesore." I was stunned by Angela's drastic change and managed a weak, uncertain smile, saying, "You're joking, right?" To which she berated me even more. "I hate jokes. Everything I said is my honest opinion. But you just said you wanted to get along." "That was just an excuse to be alone with you." Hearing this unexpected statement, my mind went into a panic and my hand, covering my mouth, started trembling. Wait a minute. I can't comprehend this. Does she hate me? As I took a deep breath trying to understand what was said, she hurled more insults at me. "People who live leisurely at home without working are called parasites. Why are you being so harsh? Did you come to my room just to say these things?" "Yes. I feel sick having someone who only consumes money living in this house." I never imagined she could be this kind of person. My mind was still in turmoil, but I knew I had to respond. Looking her in the eye, I said, "I am working and paying for my living expenses." "Don't lie. How can you work while staying at home? Are you stupid?" I explained that I work from home, but she didn't believe me at all. Instead, she demanded that I, a useless freeloader, leave the house. I was shocked by such harsh words from her, whom I had only met a few times since my brother's marriage. Confused and unsure what to do, she said, "I can't stand even breathing the same air as you," and left the room. Alone, I kept replaying her words in my head. Should I tell my brother? As I was about to open my door, I remembered my past self. After falling down the stairs and losing consciousness, I awoke in the hospital to find my legs immobile. At that time, I couldn't accept this new reality immediately. Though I claimed to live facing forward, in reality, I hardly left my home, conscious of other people's eyes. Maybe Angela is in a similar situation. Instead of upsetting everyone by telling my parents and brother, I decided to wait and see. Surely, if we live together, we'll understand each other eventually. With that thought, I calmed my shaking heart. I tried to act cheerful around Angela, initiating conversations to get along better. But her cruel behavior only worsened day by day. She played the kind sister when our parents and brother were around, but as soon as they left for work, her harassment began. You don't work or pay, so you don't have the right to eat. One day, she threw away my lunch as soon as I sat down at the dining table. I've told you before, I do work, and I contribute to the food expenses. I have the right to eat. If you lie too much, your nose will grow like Pinocchio's. No matter how much I explained, Angela wouldn't listen. She insulted me and intentionally blocked my room door with objects to trap me inside. Unable to endure anymore, I told my parents and brother when they returned from work. I started talking when Angira is around, making sure she couldn't deny it. I'm having trouble because Angela threw away my food and trapped me in my room. That's not true. She said she didn't like what I made and threw it away. I was cleaning and accidentally left the vacuum cleaner in front of Margaret's room. I'm sorry for not being useful. Margaret, I'm sorry for making you feel bad. Angela acted like an actress, tearfully apologizing to me, and my parents and brother were completely deceived. I couldn't win against this. I started thinking that it would be better not to engage with her. After that, I hardly talked and spent more time in my room. One day, a year later, as I was returning to my room after breakfast, she started yelling at me in the hallway. Still planning to stay in your parents' house? You're so persistent. I'm sick of this pest. You useless parasite, get out now. Being used to her harassment, I pretended not to hear. But then she stood in front of me, blocking my path. Please move aside. As I tried to push past, Angela laughed and forcefully kicked the side of my wheelchair. I was hit by a severe impact and toppled over before I could steady myself. A sharp pain shot through my arm. I tried to get up, but I couldn't right my wheelchair lying on its side. Crawling on the floor in pain and humiliation, I looked up to see she standing over me, looking smug. Desperately looking up, I saw her trying to suppress a laugh, her arms crossed, clearly enjoying the situation. How pathetic you look. What a spectacle. Please, help me. Well, if I must. There. She kicked my wheelchair even further away, putting it out of my reach. Don't you think this is too much? I have to do this to get rid of a parasite, don't I? Give me back my wheelchair now. Not until you say you're leaving this house. So, what will it be? Looking down on me and acting so cruelly with ease, I realized I could never understand her. I decided to leave the home I'd grown up in. Fine. I'll move to a high-rise condominium. A high-rise condominium? As if you could afford that. Your denial is just sad. I don't care if you don't believe me. I'm leaving. Please return my wheelchair. Just wait for the caretaker who's due soon. I'm finally getting rid of the nuisance. Now this big house and all its wealth will be mine. Get on your precious wheelchair and start packing. That's when I realized her true nature. She would go this far for her own desires. Such a terrifying person. She looked like nothing but a devil to me, leaving me on the floor without returning my wheelchair, and then leaving the house. The floor was cold. And I was getting colder. I need to do something. Lying in the hallway in the middle of winter, my body temperature dropped rapidly. I tried to crawl to my wheelchair, but my injured arm was too weak to move. What if I stay like this? Shivering from the cold, I heard the front door open, and the caretaker arrived. Help me, please! Hearing my cry, the caretaker rushed over in a panic. Rubbing my injured arm unconsciously, the caretaker noticed something was wrong and immediately took me to the hospital. Luckily, there were no fractures, just bruises, so I was prescribed some ointment. Back at home, filled with frustration, I started preparing to move. I won't let this go. I'll show everyone her true nature. And so, the day of my move arrived. Angela had finished breakfast and was getting ready to leave. Hurrying to the entrance, she said to me, "Make sure you clean up and leave before I come back. And never return to this house. Don't worry. I'll leave without leaving a trace. Then goodbye. Forever." She left in unusually high spirits, her voice lively. I wonder what face she'd make if she knew the tragedy about to befall her. Get ready, my plan is almost complete. Despite saying this, it was hard to leave my cherished home. I said my farewells, touching the pillars and walls for the last time. Goodbye, my dear home. Thank you for everything. As the moving truck drove away, I watched the house disappear from view with a sense of longing. And true to my word to Angela, I moved into the top floor of a high-rise condominium. Watching the outside view, evening came before I knew it. The setting sun peeked through the buildings, illuminating my face. So beautiful. I can see this every day from now. Despite everything, I was filled with hope for my new life when my mobile phone rang. Seeing Angela's name on the screen, I calmly answered the call. "What's going on?" "The house is empty. I've moved out, as you can see. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now." "Wait. Who gave you permission to do this? There's no TV, no air conditioner. I bought everything in the house, so no permission was needed." "What? Don't be ridiculous. Return everything." "I won't give back what's mine. By the way, I paid for the house's renovation and utilities. I should be asking you for money." "What? You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious, as you hate jokes. And yes, I moved to a high-rise condominium. The view from the top floor is amazing." I took the opportunity to tell her the truth she never listened to. "Did you realize you were bullying someone who provided you food and shelter? That's impossible. I never took anything from you. How did a homebody like you make money?" "I'm a stock trader." "That's a transparent lie. I worked for the securities company before my accident. Trading stocks is easy for me. I have $3 million in savings now." "Wait. Are you saying you, not your parents, are the wealthy one?" "Yes. I let my parents and Kevin save their earnings for retirement." "What? I married into the family thinking they were rich." Angela's true intentions spilled out. I knew it but had to ask, and she confirmed my suspicions. "Didn't you love Kevin?" "Love doesn't fill the stomach. I thought you were rich after seeing the big house. I was so fooled." "You misunderstood on your own. By the way, I invest in properties too. I own several apartments besides this condo. The wealthy and victorious one is me. You misjudged, sadly." "What? I won't forgive you." "Make a fuss if you want. You should worry about yourself." "Why?" "I've put that house up for sale." "We're still living there." "That's terrible." "My parents and Kevin moved with me, so you're left alone." "Oh, and Kevin has blocked your calls and emails." "What?" I almost laughed at her loud and shocked reaction. She frantically tried to contact Kevin, but of course, got no response. I revealed more truths she didn't know. "I owe it to you, Angela, for pushing me in the wheelchair and causing my injury." "Thank you." "What?" "The caretakers saw everything and told my family, so they helped me. Actually, we had secretly planned to move out without you. Moreover, my brother prepared something to definitely trap you. Remember last night when Kevin suggested you go out today to make moving easier? That was to clear the house before you knew it." She was silent for a moment, then suddenly changed her tone, trying to sound sweet. "Margaret, I think I went a little too far. Let's be close from now on. Okay? Telling such lies will make your nose grow like Pinocchio's. I wish we could be real sisters, Margaret. I can't stand this nonsense. By the way, this whole conversation is on speaker, and my family is listening. No one will forgive you. Kevin is divorcing you, so please live well on your own. She, realizing she couldn't persuade me, made a last-ditch effort. Kevin, can you hear me? You're joking about the divorce, right? He doesn't seem interested in responding. He's laughing and enjoying your desperate situation. Shut up. Let's talk properly. I'll find your condo and come right now. Tell me where. Please. Everyone burst into laughter at her, thinking she could still be forgiven. But knowing her, she might try to find our new home, so I sternly warned her. If you force your way into the condo, I'll sue you for trespassing. Don't say such scary things. I'm serious. And about the injury and mental distress you caused, I'll sue for compensation. I have the hospital reports, so you can't escape. Pay $20,000. I'll be broke. You don't need the money, you're rich. I'm asking for compensation to make you reflect. If you don't agree, talk to my lawyer. Goodbye forever. I don't care about poor Kevin, but I don't want to lose wealthy you. I apologize. Please forgive me. No way, you fool. I hung up forcefully. I gave Angela's photo to the condo's doorman, warning him about her, so security will respond if she steps foot inside. My brother, not wanting to see Angela's face anymore, had a lawyer I know finalize the divorce. Angela, who squandered my brother's earnings, only got $2,000 in the property settlement. She was living in the house we put up for sale, but the real estate buyer found her and she was fined for trespassing. Angela, now a criminal, is shunned even by her family and is lost without a home. I demanded the promised $20,000 in compensation. We will make sure she pays. Our family is living spaciously in a new high-rise condo, enjoying every day. Although I liked my big detached house, the view from the expansive windows, unobstructed by my wheelchair, is refreshing. The city lights at night bring a new joy. Get back home and start cooking quickly. That was the first thing my husband blurted out over the phone while I was at work. When he got home, he was visibly upset that dinner wasn't ready. Even though I had explained to him that I'm in the middle of a big project at work and it's a crucial time, he still clings to the old-fashioned belief that housework is a woman's job. You're obviously using work as an excuse to skip out on chores. I'll give you a piece of my mind when you get back. Despite having ended the call, my phone's notification light kept flashing incessantly. It was as if it was reflecting my husband's unending anger, causing me to sigh repeatedly. I'm Natalie, 40 years old. Earlier this year, I was promoted to a managerial position. Until I got married to Matthew, who is 6 years my senior, 3 years ago, my life was all about work. After getting married, I thought about scaling back my work, but then came the unexpected promotion. Now, with more responsibilities, my workload has only increased. Nonetheless, I've been trying to balance housework as best as I can. But feeling the strain of juggling both, I've asked Matthew to help out. Please, can't you help out a bit with the chores? What? Why should I do it? I'm the head of this household. But we're a dual-income couple without kids. I think it's only fair you do some housework. Despite having those discussions many times, he eventually went and complained to my mother-in-law. Truth be told, mother-in-law is quite a tricky character. Of course, the wife should do all the housework. You're failing as a wife, she would say. Every time I see her, she gives me a hard time. Plus, she, who loves designer brands, always mocks my work-appropriate jacket and pants style as drab and cheap. Before I knew it, I was constantly receiving snide remarks from my mother-in-law and fighting with my husband, who doesn't understand the concept of a dual-income couple. All this leaves me with little hope for the future and a growing sense of despair. Then, one day, as I finished work and opened the front door of my house, I saw in-laws' shoes. Are they both here? This is going to be troublesome. Just as I dreaded, my mother-in-law, standing tall, started lecturing me as expected. I've been waiting for you, Natalie. Leaving the house empty till this hour because of work. You really don't understand your role as a wife. Yeah, sorry. I replied, too tired to argue, enduring the hunger and her relentless sarcasm. While she was going on with her one-sided sermon, my father-in-law was lounging on the sofa, an annoying sight, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. A wife who neglects her home is a worry for our old age. We should move in together immediately. That's a bit. Your opinion doesn't matter. We've already planned to move in with you and even arranged a mortgage for a suitable house. Standing beside her, my husband listened to our conversation, then confidently and excitedly approached me with his news. Seeing his proud face, she looked very pleased. I couldn't help but feel completely excluded. That's exactly why I don't want that. If you don't like living with my parents, then let's get a divorce. That's impossible. Because... He cut me off, refusing to listen and, as usual, imposing his own opinions. Then just do as I, the man of the house, say. Don't act so high and mighty just because you work at a major company. Women should be quiet and obedient. It crossed my mind that he might not even remember our previous discussions. They, apparently giving up on my input, were excitedly discussing the new house. We'll have separate entrances in the new house for us. You guys will want your own entrance, right? Feel free to boss Natalie around whenever you need. Thank you, you are so thoughtful. A wife is like a free housekeeper, I'll use her to my heart's content. Despite the headache-inducing conversation, with the house loan already taken, I had no choice but to let Matthew have his way. 2 weeks later, on my rare day off, my in-laws suddenly moved into our house. Without any prior notice, mother-in-law, with her piles of luggage, barged in as if she owned the place. Matthew was out, and when I tried to call him to figure out what was happening, he didn't answer. My mother-in-law, in her usual flashy, embroidered designer clothes, started ordering me around as if it was the most natural thing. My father-in-law sank deeply into the sofa, showing no intention of helping. Clear out those cheap bags and clothes from your room. We're using your closet and bed from today. A semi-double bed is too much for you. You can sleep in the hallway. What? Didn't you hear me? Get moving. Wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to move in together only after getting the new house? Our house sold quicker than expected. Starting today, I'm going to retrain you to be a proper wife. She twisted her mouth maliciously, seeming to enjoy the moment. She completely ignored everything I said. Just thinking about starting life with father-in-law, who wouldn't even move things in front of him, weighed heavily on my heart. Doing as I was told, I began taking my clothes and bags out of my room, to her satisfaction. You're always wearing the same clothes despite your good salary, and you don't even own a designer bag. Yeah, I don't really focus on that stuff. That's why you're so plain and boring. You must have a lot saved up since you don't spend. Not really. Lying again. She mocking laughter, now even more spiteful, made me feel like she was targeting my savings. Also, you'll be buying all new appliances and furniture when we move to the new house. We only brought our clothes and newly acquired golf gear. She made decisions without listening to my opinion. Biting back what I wanted to say, I focused on tidying up. Not owning much, I quickly moved my belongings from my room to storage. Now it's time to store our important stuff. Hurry up. I placed her clothes and father-in-law's golf bags in the closet I had been using. She looked very satisfied watching this. As I was finishing up, my husband returned home and happily addressed me, seeing the situation. First of all, it was a luxury for a wife like you to even have a room. Leave it to my mother, and you'll become a proper wife. This is just the beginning. I'll drill into you what it means to be a wife. True to her word, the next day I was woken up at dawn to prepare breakfast for everyone, including sandwiches I had never before made for my husband. My mother-in-law just watched, offering no help. After completing everything and heading to work, she would call to order me to do shopping, and upon returning home, there was no rest, only dinner preparation. By the time I finished washing the dishes, my husband and mother-in-law were enjoying their shower time. Exhausted, as I headed to shower, she added, "Use the stored water in the bathtub to wash yourself. You don't get the luxury of a shower." Entering the shower room silently, I found the water dirty and unappealing. "Remember, use the stored water." I was shocked when the shower door suddenly opened. All I wanted was some privacy in the shower, but she wouldn't even allow me that. Why must I endure this when I'm the one paying the high heating bill? I'm so tired. Why are wives always looked down upon, regardless of the era? I could just refuse, but to avoid further conflicts, I told myself it was just temporary endurance. Of course, my husband showed no concern for me. In fact, he started exploiting me more. "Hey Natalie, bring me beer and snacks." Lately, he just lounged on the sofa, playing games. Angered, I glared at him, and he yelled back, "Don't get cocky. You just need to listen to me and my mother." I felt strongly that there was no one on my side in this house. A month into this hellish life, reaching my limit, I got a call from a real estate agent during lunch break. I had been secretly preparing to leave the house. Finally, the day I've been waiting for. I can be free. The next morning, with an innocent expression, I carried my suitcase to the living room where they were. "I'll be on a business trip to Los Angeles for a few days." What an arrogant way to say it. Make sure to buy gifts. Don't forget there's a mountain of housework waiting when you get back. And so, I left the house. The business trip was a lie. I moved into my new house straight after work. Alone for the first time in a while, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. From now on, I'll live for myself. I resolved in my heart. Starting that day, I blocked my husband's calls and cut off all communication. A week later, my husband, unable to hide his irritation at my not returning home, was lurking behind a pillar at my workplace. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my arm tightly. His eyes were wild, his face flushed, glaring at me threateningly. "I knew it. You were back from your trip already. Let's go home." "No, I'm not going back." "What nonsense are you spouting? How dare you, a wife, act like this? Do you want a divorce that badly?" "Yes. No one will take you in after me. Actually, we're already divorced, so we're strangers now. You haven't forgotten, have you?" "Huh? You slapped a divorce paper in my face 3 months ago after a huge fight." "What? Did you file it?" His voice trembled as he asked for confirmation. When I affirmed, he was visibly shocked and disoriented. In fact, before my in-laws arrived, he had suggested living together. I naturally refused, and in anger, he presented the divorce papers. I made good use of them. "But just recently, when I said if you didn't like living together we should divorce, you said that's impossible." "We're already divorced." "It's ridiculous to live together when we're separated, isn't it?" "Then why were you living with us?" "I bought a new apartment but couldn't move in immediately. I was told it would take 1 to 2 months, and after spending much of my savings on the apartment, I couldn't afford a hotel." He was stunned, not only that the divorce was already final, but also that I had purchased an apartment. His previously flushed face turned pale. "Now that you understand, are we done here?" "Not at all. That's joint property, right? I bought it with money I saved before marriage, so it's my personal property." "Seriously? Oh, right. Your stuff is still there, come get it." "You're just saying that to get your parents to persuade me. I've seen through all your plans. I've packed everything I need in my suitcase. I've even reserved luxury furniture from famous brands." For a moment, he looked envious. Had he cherished me, this wouldn't have been the outcome. Such a pity. "I don't accept this. I'm canceling the divorce." "As I said, you're the one who slapped the divorce papers on me. Even if you take it to court, it'll be a waste of effort. Look, I'm in trouble without you. I can't pay off the mortgage for the house we bought together. I was counting on splitting it with you since you earn more. Then he started to cry. I was astonished to hear he relied on my salary to buy the house. Doing the math, at 45 years old, Matthew took out a 35-year mortgage. He'd be 80 by the time it's paid off. It's none of my concern now. You'll have to pay it all yourself. No, no, no. Don't be cold, help me find a solution. We were married once, after all. Your parents have the money from selling their house. Use that. Well, actually, they didn't sell the house. It was auctioned off due to my parents defaulting on the loan. What did they spend the money on? Designer clothes, bags, and Dad's expensive golf gear. I was shocked. They really intended to live off me. The day they moved in, my suspicion that they were after my money wasn't unfounded. I'm glad I divorced. I felt reassured about my decision. Despite their precarious situation, they gambled, hoping for a big win. They ended up borrowing dangerously and lost everything. Now, just paying the interest is a struggle. I refuse to spend my life with such people. Never contact me again. Then my ex-husband blurted out something ridiculous. The house we bought is joint property since we bought it before the divorce. What? You have a duty to pay the mortgage. It's in your name. If it's recently bought, selling it won't even cover the deficit. If you think I'm lying, check it out. Then let's get back together. I have no intention of returning to a husband who looks down on me as a wife. What nonsense he was speaking. He didn't understand how awful his actions were. Then lend me money. Sleep talking is meant to happen while you are sleeping. By the way, our joint savings had $10,000, so I took $5,000 as my share. Goodbye forever. If you ambush me again, I'll call the police. Matthew collapsed as if knocked out. I walked past him and returned to my home. Feeding their extravagant parents and paying the mortgage must be hellish. I didn't expect to be ambushed again, but just to be safe, I changed to a new mobile phone and got a different number. The house my ex-husband bought, intended for co-living, was auctioned off within a year due to my in-laws' presence causing delays in mortgage and property tax payments. Relying on my income for the new house, it was obviously difficult for them to make payments once I left. Later, my in-laws created more debt for themselves and failed to repay it, leading to debt collectors' arrival. I heard they were forced into labor at a place arranged by the collectors, having to give up their cherished designer items and luxury golf clubs. Matthew, of course, with no money, ended up living in an old apartment with dubious stains on the floor and no shower. In such a state, it's unlikely he'll find a new wife. I'm enjoying my days, excited about life in my new apartment. The freedom to live without anyone's orders, just relaxing, is blissful. Living alone is the best. Upon arriving at the Target high-rise apartment, I approached the concierge and was handed the keys to the room. Through the elevator reserved for the higher floors, I made my way to the top floor of the apartment. Wow, this is lovely! As the door opened, my sister-in-law, Laura, was the first to leap in, dancing around as she exclaimed, "Let's get unpacking." I called out, but no one offered to help. Predictable, yet it still irked me. The movers placed the boxes where directed, and I was left to unpack alone. I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storeroom. My father-in-law, Harrison, and my mother-in-law, Rosalind, went ahead and decided who was getting which room. But I ignored them and continued my work. This room is really nice. It would make a great final home. Good for us. My husband, Oliver, and the in-laws said to each other, all smiles. It feels like a dream to live in such a house, Laura said with her eyes brimming with tears. It might be time to reveal the truth. Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh? My name is Katrina. I'm a 32-year-old freelance illustrator. I used to work for a major publishing company but went independent and now mainly take on projects from my former employer, while also starting to work as a children's book author. I married Oliver 2 years ago, and we began living together in the apartment I've been residing in. The reason we live in my house is that it's my property, and Oliver, who was renting elsewhere, moved in with me. My parents died in a car accident when I was young. Afterwards, I was raised by my grandparents, and after graduating from college and securing a job, I bought this apartment. The payment was made using the compensation and insurance money received from my parents' accident. My grandparents raised me without touching that money and gave it to me to use for myself when I graduated college. I bought this place because my grandparents entered a nursing home. They had reserved a spot in the nursing facility, intending to move in together after raising me, not wanting me to bear the burden of their care. After much thought, I decided to buy this convenient apartment, which was also close to the nursing home my grandparents were in. My grandparents said there were other things I could spend the money on, but to me, this was the best use. I have been living here for almost 10 years now. The 10 years I spent with my parents and the 10 years I spent with my grandparents are nearly equal. I've been living in this apartment a third of my life, and I have grown quite attached to this place. I met Oliver at a friend's wedding after-party. He was a colleague of my friend's husband. We were of the same age and formed a group that started hanging out together. Over time, several couples formed from this group, and a few have married. And one of those couples was Oliver and I. Oliver was cheerful and seemed to brighten the room just by being there. From our first meeting, I was attracted to him. I admired his cheerful nature, something I lacked, and thought he was a wonderful person. However, that was only the face Oliver showed to the world, and I quickly learned about his other side after we got married. While Oliver was very gentlemanly during our courtship, he turned out to be the type who changes once the marriage is set. No, it was worse than that. After we got married, he said something unbelievable. "Since I'm living in your house, you should take care of the living expenses." "What do you mean?" "The expenses would be the same even if I weren't here, right? So, you should continue to cover them as you have been." I think that's how it should be. Indeed, my apartment was already paid off, with no mortgage remaining. However, there were still maintenance fees, a sinking fund for repairs, and property tax. And since we have a car, there's also the parking fee. So, those are expenses you'd be paying even if I weren't here, right? That's true, but then, there should be no problem with you continuing to pay them as usual. His argument seemed reasonable at first glance, but was fundamentally flawed. But Oliver, you're living here now, too. We agreed to split the living expenses. I'd really appreciate it if you could contribute. When I said this, Oliver's eyes narrowed angrily. "You're so money-grubbing! I never thought you were that kind of woman." I was stunned and speechless. To me, it was obvious that as a married couple, we would share our lives equally. I had naturally assumed we would split the expenses for our home. "I'm not saying I won't contribute anything. I'll definitely pay half for my part. But you own this house, right?" So, he meant since it's my property, I should bear the costs. "I'll pay for my own necessities, isn't that fair enough?" Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. In the beginning, Oliver did pay half the living expenses as promised, but only the half that I billed him for. This month's electricity bill came to this amount. That seems quite high. You're probably wasting money working from home? I had quit my job while dating Oliver and started working freelance. Though I occasionally went out for meetings and networking, most of my work was done from home. It doesn't seem fair. First, Oliver complained about the high utility bills. Unfair? How so? Well, I work outside almost all day. And I'm supposed to pay for your electricity use while you work from home? What a reasoning. I was too astounded to respond. I only use a little when I come home to sleep. So, I don't have to pay half, right? Following this logic, Oliver began paying only a minimal amount. The same went for gas and water bills. Still, I tolerated it. Sure, Oliver was only home for a short time. And having an extra person did significantly increase the utility bills. But it was impossible to calculate exactly how much each of us used. Despite his complaints, we did share the living expenses, so I silently accepted his reasoning. Looking back, I can't believe how foolish I was, but at the time, I thought it was necessary. I decided it was better to endure and keep our marital life peaceful than to fight over something trivial from the start. Aside from money issues, Oliver was as bright and fun as before we got married. Though the financial concern always lingered in the back of my mind, I didn't struggle to live without his contributions. And I valued our happy times more. But the supposed happiness began to feel increasingly precarious. More overtime today, they really need to get it together. Oliver started coming home later, sounding annoyed. Are you okay with all this overtime? There's a guideline that working over a certain number of hours a month is dangerous. You don't understand. Those are just nominal figures. A good salesman isn't just working the hours logged on the time card. Oliver said this disdainfully. Katrina, you've had to pull all-nighters to meet deadlines, right? Yes, that's true. That's my point. Don't be fooled by just the apparent numbers. I graduated from an art college and worked as an illustrator. So I really didn't know much about sales. Faced with his assertion, I had no choice but to believe him. I understand. But please, don't overdo it. I know. You're kind, Katrina. I won't push myself too hard. Oliver reassured me gently, embracing my shoulder. I tried to believe in Oliver's kindness forcefully, as if believing was the only way to keep my peace of mind. Gradually, I felt increasingly betrayed by Oliver over the year. They say people can react to sudden pain, but become desensitized to slow, incremental pain. By that point, Oliver's betrayals had accumulated significantly, yet I felt I was just enduring a little longer, spending my days pretending not to notice for the sake of peace. Then, a significant event occurred. My family's coming over soon, is that okay? One morning, Oliver suddenly mentioned this. Harrison and Rosalind? And Laura too? I had visited his family's home once before we married, for a family meeting. It was a small house in the countryside. It seemed to be a fairly old house, and every part of it was old, but my parents-in-law were living there. At that time, Laura had already moved out after getting married, so I wasn't able to meet her. We did message her, but as she couldn't come due to her schedule, but gave us a message, welcome to the family. Since we didn't have a wedding ceremony and only took photos, that was the only time I met his parents. Of course, I never had a chance to meet Laura. Our friends held a party for us to congratulate, but I still hadn't met Oliver's relatives. As I didn't have much interaction with my own relatives and I did not find it so strange. Now, suddenly, his parents and Laura were coming to visit. It wasn't odd for them to want to see how we were doing after a year of marriage. Without any doubt, I agreed to Oliver's words. A week later, as promised, the in-laws came to our house. This is your place? It's not very big, is it? That was the first thing they said as they entered our home. Of course, it's not big. This house was originally bought for me to live in alone. It has 3 rooms and a spacious living dining area. One room is almost used as a storage, and the remaining rooms served as my office and bedroom. When Oliver started living with me, he wanted a space to work from home, so I gave up my office for Oliver's study. And now I work in the living room. It's spacious enough for two people to live without any inconvenience. As I was thinking this, Laura, whom I was meeting for the first time after Rosalind, entered the house. "You're right, it's smaller than I thought. Are we going to live here together?" "It's small, but bear with it. They say any place becomes comfortable if you live in it." "Well, it's better than nothing. I'll manage to live here." "How long do they intend to stay?" As I pondered vaguely, Oliver commanded me with an irritated voice. "Hey, what are you dozing off for? Hurry up and carry in my parents' luggage." "What? Oh, sorry. Which ones are their luggage?" I thought it would be just enough luggage for a short stay, maybe a duffel bag. But when I looked inside the entrance, I couldn't find anything. "What are you looking at? It's outside." Rushing to the entrance, I saw about 10 cardboard boxes piled up in the hallway. Cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house? I didn't understand the meaning, but leaving such things in the hallway would bother other residents. Fortunately, none of the boxes were too heavy, and I somehow managed to bring all of them into the living room by myself. Since it's a living dining area, it's quite spacious. Although it's obstructive, stacking them up secured enough space to place them. During this time, Oliver and the in-laws were sitting and talking. "Make coffee once you're done with the luggage. Hurry up, everyone is tired." I couldn't think properly due to the situation and moved reflexively to Oliver's words. "You really are so inconsiderate. I'm worried about our future." "I'll sleep in this room." While I was cluelessly making coffee, Laura declared our bedroom as her room. "Ah, that's fine. I'll clean up the storage with Mom, and when we're done, we'll sleep together." "It'll be nice to sleep with Oliver after a long time." Sleeping closely with family, how nice. Oliver and his parents acted as if I didn't exist, enjoying their family time. Our house only has a bedroom, a storage room, and what now serves as Oliver's study, which was my former office. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long will this lifestyle continue? It seems humans can't think properly when faced with situations far beyond their usual understanding. While I was stunned, everything had already ended. The next day, no, from the moment the in-laws moved in, hell began. "Hey, isn't the food ready yet?" "Sorry, I'm preparing it now." "You're really slow." Oliver must have a lot of patience to put up with someone like you. The in-laws lazed around the house all day, doing nothing, and treated me like a servant. At first, I endured it, thinking it would only be for a few days. But listening to the conversations between the in-laws and Oliver, it became clear that this was going to be a permanent situation, and I awakened. Here's the summary. The in-laws had fled from their hometown because Laura had returned home after getting divorced. The reason for the divorce was Laura's infidelity. She had affairs with multiple people. All of this came to light recently, and her ex-husband demanded compensation, which they couldn't afford, so they fled here. Oliver had told me that his in-laws owned their home, but that was a lie. Originally, that house belonged to Rosalind's real family, where her parents lived. Rosalind and Harrison moved in with them because they couldn't afford to live by themselves. And after Rosalind's parents passed away, they just stayed there. The real owner was Rosalind's brother, and he asked them to leave, but they stayed, claiming residency rights. Rosalind's brother had his own home, so he couldn't force his sister's family to move out. He had requested them to leave, but couldn't do no more than that. Then, with Laura returning with a mountain of compensation to pay, Rosalind and Harrison tried to sell the house to raise money. Rosalind's brother, upon learning the situation, was furious and threatened legal action. That's why the in-laws showed up at our place with all the belongings she could carry. Those belongings, 10 boxes of them, the ones I struggled to bring into our house the day they arrived, representing their entire fortune. I don't know what's inside, and frankly, I don't want to know, but it seems there's nothing of real value that could be called a fortune. In short, the in-laws moved in with us because they were broke. And it looks like they plan to live off of us indefinitely. In such a family, Oliver was miraculously smart. He was good at his studies and managed to graduate from college on a scholarship. You wouldn't guess he's part of that family just by looking at him. He continued to play the role of a refreshing, fine young man, got a job at a well-known company, and then met and married me. I couldn't see through Oliver's true nature or the real face of the in-laws. My parents had already passed away, so I'm all alone. But I'm working and already own a house. To Oliver, I must have seemed like a perfect target. No way, I'm not going to let this happen to myself. Now that I know everything, I refuse to quietly become their slave. I won't let this no-good family take advantage of me. I started planning my retaliation and took action the very next day. For now, I had to act submissive. I couldn't let Oliver or the in-laws catch on to my plan. I had to catch them off guard. Just like how they suddenly showed up here. After pretending to listen to the in-laws for about a week, one day, Laura said to me, "Give me some money." Laura demanded, extending her open right hand. She was so blatantly freeloading. It was irritating, but I had decided not to resist for now. I handed Laura a few bills. "Is this all? Don't you have more?" "I don't have more on me right now since this was sudden." "Then a credit card will do." "Absolutely not. If I gave her a card, there's no telling what she'd do with it." "I can't lend you a card. I'll withdraw some money from the bank tomorrow. Please wait until then." I managed to quiet the complaining in-laws by making that promise. I wouldn't give them the card no matter what. That night, after Oliver came home, he complained about it. "You could have just lent them the card. You're really stingy with money." I was appalled by his words, but I apologized, thinking it over. "I'm sorry. I thought there could be problems if something happened." "Like what?" "I was afraid of lending a card with a different name, and if Rosalind and Harrison got arrested for misuse, I couldn't do it." Oliver seemed satisfied with this reason. "Then, make a family card for my mom and dad. I'm counting on you." "Understood." I replied as such, but I had no intention of making one. About a month later, Oliver asked about the status of the family card. Maybe the in-laws, having received money several times, found it troublesome and urged Oliver to ask for the card. "I'm sorry, but it seems I can't make it," I said, feigning disappointment. I hadn't applied for a family card and wasn't disappointed at all. "Why not?" "Rosalind and the others are considered relatives, not family, so it doesn't work. Apparently, it's not okay just to live here temporarily." The in-laws had just rolled in without permission, and no proper arrangements had been made for living together. They haven't even changed the address registration, so it seems like there's no actual residence. "I see." Faced with this explanation, Oliver seemed to have no choice but to accept. "Well, then we just need to change the address registration." "That's right, since we're going to live here anyway. Go ahead and take care of the procedures." What a nerve for them to order me to do so. "About that, I think this house is a bit small for us to live in permanently. Now that you mention it, maybe that's why you haven't been coming home much lately." When I said that, Oliver looked a bit puzzled. I've been staying at hotels because I've been working late. Oh, that must be tough. So, I was thinking, why don't we move out of this house? Oliver and the in-laws were surprised by my suggestion. This house was originally bought for me to live alone, and while Oliver and I could barely make do, it's definitely too small in the current situation. Indeed. Look at this. Wouldn't you want to live in a house like this? I showed them the brochure for a new apartment. It was a recently completed high-rise building. The brochure featured photos of a top-floor apartment. Spacious, with large windows offering a view of the city below. How were you able to get an apartment like this? I thought our current place was too cramped, so I decided to go for it. I sold this place and added my parents' inheritance and savings to buy it. That's great. This place isn't bad, but that one is definitely better. Laura and Oliver, who had been looking skeptically, relaxed when they learned the payment was already complete. Wow, you've got some sense. I'm seeing you in a new light for the first time. Yeah, I guess I can acknowledge you as Oliver's wife. The in-laws nodded in agreement with smiles. And just like that, the move was settled smoothly. About a month later, the day of the move arrived. It was a bit sad to say goodbye to the house we had lived in for so long, but it was for a brighter future. Once the belongings were loaded into 2 trucks, we headed to our new destination. Upon arriving at the high-rise and speaking to the concierge, we were handed the keys to our apartment. To our top-floor apartment via the high-rise exclusive elevator. Wow, it's beautiful! Laura was the first to dash in, exclaiming as if dancing. Let's get unpacking. I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, but still infuriating. The movers placed the brought items where directed, and I began unpacking alone. I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storage. The in-laws were assigning rooms as they pleased, but I ignored them and continued my work. This room is truly wonderful. A great choice for our final home. I'm glad you feel that way. Oliver and the in-laws were all smiles, exchanging such words. It's like a dream to live in a house like this, Laura said, teary-eyed. Now, it might be a good time for the reveal. Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh? A good moment to show the in-laws reality. Why would you all live here? What are you talking about? It's our new home. We're the ones who will live here. Huh? I feigned exaggerated surprise. This isn't your house. I bought this place to live with my grandparents. You asked if we wanted to live in a house like this. Laura began to make a scene, raising her voice. Yes, I did ask if you wanted to live here, but that's all I did. I never said you could live here. Just as I said, I never mentioned living together. Who would want to live with these people forever? So, please leave now. I am the owner of this house. The landlord is telling you to leave. Please comply before things get complicated. Don't be ridiculous! Oliver stomped his feet in anger, his face turning red. The only thing you should be doing is listening to me. My family and I will live in this house. If you don't like it, you should leave. That's right, get out. That's right, leave. Oliver and the in-laws were pressuring me to leave. I contacted the concierge directly through the intercom on the wall. Excuse me, there are some strange people refusing to leave my house and trying to kick me out, the actual resident. Please come immediately. As soon as I finished speaking, a siren sounded throughout the room. What's this? So noisy. Make it stop right now. The security staff arrived promptly after the alert. This is a high-end condominium after all. These people are the building security. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police next. When the security officer pressed the doorbell and asked what happened, the in-laws started panicking. They realized what I said wasn't a lie. Although the security staff arrived, the in-laws pleaded, crawling on the ground, asking to be heard. I decided to listen, curious about what Oliver had been telling them. Oliver had been telling the in-laws I was a pitiable woman with no relatives, and that I couldn't live without him. So that's why he was keeping me here. And that they could use me as they pleased, like a housekeeper. That was what he had been telling his own parents. I felt sympathy for the in-laws who provided such valuable testimony. Actually, when I gave money to the in-laws, I made them sign a paper with the amount written on it. Essentially, it was a promissory note. I want proof that I've handed it over properly to show Oliver. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. If you sign it, I'll give you as much as you want. Knowing they could get as much money as they wanted just by signing, the in-laws easily complied. Thanks to that, I had proof of how much I had lent them. I had been thinking of collecting from the in-laws, but it seemed impossible for them to pay back. So I decided to take it from Oliver instead and thought it best to evict them from the apartment. Thanks to this, you've helped me a lot. If you leave now, I'll consider this never happened, but if you come back, you'll have to pay everything all at once. As I showed them the promissory note and said this, the in-laws finally gave up and left. I'm Katrina's husband. I have the right to live here. I won't leave. Oliver refused to move. If that's how you feel, let's settle this here and now. All right, let's have a little talk then. But if you try anything funny, I'll call them right back. I thanked the security guards and sent them back home. Why are you doing this? Did you dislike my family that much? Of course I do. They suddenly show up, treating me like slaves in a sneak attack. I made it clear to Oliver. Fine. If you dislike them that much, I'll tell my mom and dad to leave. But I can stay, right? I was astounded. He was planning to abandon his in-laws just so he could stay. What a despicable man. No, you need to leave too. Why? We're married, aren't we? I presented Oliver with a folder. What is this? Oliver turned pale as he looked inside the folder. A pretty woman, isn't she? I heard you've been living together for half the week lately. It was evidence of Oliver's affair. There were tons of photos of the two looking cozy, arm in arm, walking together, entering a hotel. Oliver had started dating her right after marrying me. I heard you had plans to live with her in that apartment once we were separated. Lies! Who would say such a thing? I turned on the voice recorder I was holding. The voice of the other woman played, and Oliver froze. The evidence was obtained by a detective agency. They approached the woman, kindly informed her that Oliver was married, and recorded what she had to say. The woman proudly claimed that Oliver was in the midst of divorce proceedings, and once he kicked out his wife, they would live together in Oliver's apartment. Oliver told his affair partner he wanted to divorce, but I wouldn't agree, and after being worn out by the in-laws, I would quietly leave. The affair partner believed she was the only one Oliver loved, thinking the marriage had already cooled off. True love will prevail, she laughed. But when she realized she was talking to someone from a detective agency, she panicked and started to cover for herself. She claimed she was also deceived by Oliver, truly believing the marriage was over. She begged for forgiveness, promising to tell everything. The detective asked me what to do, and upon saying it depended on what she said, she spilled everything not even asked for. All of that was recorded. I guess true love seems quite fragile. Yes, I got the evidence. Looks like this is going to cost a pretty penny in damages. Oliver collapsed weakly onto the floor. Your stuff is already sent to that woman's condo, so you can start living there from today. Now, leave. I called the concierge again and had Oliver, who was still drained, thrown out. As promised, I decided not to delve further into the affair partner. Her testimony was enough to prove Oliver's maliciousness. Thanks to that, I was able to get a substantial amount in damages from Oliver. It was enough to forgive him. However, I made sure to inform the woman's parents and her company. I hadn't promised not to tell anyone, so it should be fine to talk. The woman was Oliver's junior at work. They got close as they worked together. It would have been a nice story if they weren't married. I complained to the company about what kind of employee training they were providing, which led to our divorce. The company apologized for the lack of supervision. Concerned about their social reputation, the company made the woman resign under the guise of voluntary resignation. Oliver was demoted and transferred from the head office to a subsidiary as a punishment. During work hours, the two of them would concoct lies about sales meetings and sneak off to hotels, or take trips together and claim them as business expenses. Given the harm they caused the company, such actions seemed justified to them. I heard through the grapevine that the in-laws are now living together in her apartment for real. It's your fault things have ended up like this, take responsibility. That's what they say, squatting in the condominium where Oliver and the woman live. Oliver and the woman had to take out loans to pay me compensation. Now they live a difficult life, struggling every day to repay their debt. It might be about time to finally kick the in-laws out, I suppose. Oliver thought I was just some pitiful woman, burdened with grandparents who were in a care facility, but the reality was a bit different. My grandparents were indeed in a facility, but it was a luxurious place where wealthy people live gracefully. They used to run a company and had planned to pass it on to my parents, but they died young. So they retired after handing it over to someone they could trust. That was the year I graduated from college. I've loved drawing since I was a child and have won numerous awards for it. I told my grandparents I wanted to work in art, so they never forced me to take over the company. They decided to move into that facility so I could live freely as I wished. I followed my dreams into a career related to art, and now I'm becoming known as a children's book author. My illustrated books have become a big hit, and I'm now somewhat of a celebrity. I feel like my luck has turned around dramatically since splitting up with Oliver. He must be regretting it by now. I bought that high-rise apartment with the money from selling that condo, my parents' inheritance, and my book royalties. I wanted to live with my grandparents again while they were still healthy. Of course, I'm keeping the facility as an option. It's necessary for when either of my grandparents becomes physically incapacitated and needs extensive care. But for now, they're both still healthy. Thanks to my book sales, I can finally give back to my grandparents. We can live happily together for a while longer. Though I went through some hardships because of that man, my future is looking bright.
My name is Maya. I come from a long line of doctors. My dad and my brother are both physicians. But I was never good at studying, so med school was out of the question for me. Instead, I went to a specialized school for design because I loved drawing. Now, I work at a design agency. Even though I chose a different path, my parents never had a problem with it. However, the same can be said for Eloise, my sister-in-law who married my brother. Maya, are you hiding in your room again? I keep telling you I'm working. You sure you're not just messing around? Of course not. Just like any other job, weekdays during the day are my working hours. I work in web design. So as long as I have a computer, I can work from home. But Eloise just doesn't get it. Sure, you're doing that work from home thing, right? I know what that is. If you say so. But work from home jobs are more like pocket money, right? Hard to call that a real job. Alois always says stuff like this, trying to one me up. Finally, I had no choice but to talk to my brother about it. He explained to Alois what my job entails, but Alois still didn't understand. So I started going to the design office a few times a week. Seeing this, Alois suddenly changed her tune. It seems she finally realized I have a real job. Ever since, she stopped complaining and kept her distance from my room. That's not to say my relationship with Alois got worse. If anything, Alois has been the one trying to improve our relationship. Maya, I bought some cake while shopping. Please have some. Thank you, Alois. Now, conversations like this have become an everyday occurrences. Sometimes I buy souvenirs for Alois when I go to work. In this way, our relationship gradually improved. Then, on one particular Sunday, when I went to the living room, my brother Nolan was loudly talking on the phone.
Got it. I'm on my way.
What's going on, big brother?
It's an emergency call. I was planning to go out with Alois and Carlos since mom and dad are not around.
Carlos is the name of my brother's son, so Carlos is my nephew. Seeing my brother looking a bit distressed, Alois turned to me and said, How about it, Maya? Why don't the three of us go out for lunch? Me? Why not? Nolan seems busy and it's a perfect opportunity. That makes sense. I smiled and nodded. Then my brother also approved of us going out looking relieved. So after sending off my brother, we left the house. But my smile only lasted until then, because Alois took us to a high-end restaurant I have never been to before. I froze in front of the restaurant and blurted, Are we really eating at such an upscale place? Do you not like it? Alois tilted her head. It's not that bad, but it looks pretty expensive. Don't worry, this place is Nolan's regular spot. Well, it's different for Nolan since he's a doctor, but even though I come from a family of doctors, I'm just an ordinary person working at a regular company. I'm not rich, and I earn a regular salary. I felt quite intimidated. However, thinking that it's all part of gaining experience, I went into the restaurant with Alois. The inside of the restaurant felt even more luxurious than I thought. The ingredients were fresh and both the taste and service were top-notch. Getting caught up in the atmosphere, I ended up consuming about $200 worth of food in no time. Looking over, I noticed that Alois had eaten just as much. Carlos, although not as much as us, had consumed food worth a few tens of dollars. Feeling rattled, I suggested to Alois, Carlos has eaten quite a bit too. How about we split the bill? But Alois laughed and said, What are you talking about? I invited you, so I'll pay. But it's going to be pretty expensive. Don't worry, it's fine. Alois kept smiling. I felt overwhelmed, thinking this must be what it looks like to be a doctor's wife and wealthy. While I was pondering this, Alois told the staff, We would like the bill, please. I'm sorry, Alois. Thanks for treating us. Of course, Maya. You're my sister, even if it's just by marriage. I had always been doted on by my older brother. Still, I thought having a sister would have been nice if she treated me like this. Just as I thought this, Alois let out a yelp while rummaging through her bag. Oh no! I forgot my wallet. What? I must have left it somewhere. Alois tilted her head as she spoke, while the cashier, looking increasingly annoyed. Alois, are you okay? Worried, I spoke to Alois. Sorry, Maya, could you cover the bill? Me? Well, I can't help it. It's too much to settle with mobile payment. Yeah, I guess so. In the end, I had no choice but to pay with my card. Afterwards, Alois kept apologizing. I was really careless. I'm so sorry. It's fine. You'll pay me back, right? Oh, I'll definitely pay you back. Don't worry. I believed Alois's words, but my trust was broken. I reminded her several times when we got home, but Alois kept making excuses, never paying me back. Eventually, my brother came home and Alois started preparing dinner. I guess I'll just chalk this one up as a lesson learned. I tried reminding her the next day too, but the result was the same. Alois kept making excuses and dodging the issue. Gradually, I gave up on getting paid back.
I am never going out for meals with her again.
I had decided that in my heart. Just then, my mom approached me with some news. Maya, you're free this Sunday, right? Yeah, why? Your father and I have decided to go on a day trip bus tour for peach picking.
Oh, that sounds like a nice getaway for you two. Don't worry about me. Go ahead and enjoy yourself.
So, I'll be out on Sunday. Nolan said he'll be at a conference too. Can you keep an eye on things with Alois?
Uh-huh. My brother won't be here either?
According to Mom, my brother would also be away attending a conference.
What's more, Mom even gave Alois some money for lunch before heading out.
Use that money to take Carlos to a fast food place, will you?
I would rather not. You're family now. You don't need to be so formal.
That's not the point.
I really wanted to refuse, but I couldn't. So it was decided. On Sunday, Alois, Carlos, and I would go to a fast food restaurant. And then came Sunday.
Once my parents and brother had left, Alois approached me. Hey, Maya, about taking Carlos to the fast food place?
Right.
Yeah, but are you uneasy about it?
Well, given what happened last time, I'm a bit anxious.
Don't worry, we can pay with just our phones these days. Who forgets their phone?
Alois chuckled and showed me her phone. Indeed, we could easily pay at a fast food place using mobile payments. Plus, Alois is always on social media, so there is no way she would forget her phone. Reassured, the three of us left the house. We went to a nearby fast food chain. The prices were reasonable, and I enjoyed my burger without any concern. But then, as we headed to the counter to pay,
oh no! I forgot my wallet again!
Alois feigned surprise, but I calmly pointed out, you said we could pay with our phones, remember?
Oh, right, I totally forgot.
Then please go ahead and pay, Alois. I thought it was going smoothly this time, but then the cashier gave us a strange look. Sorry, but it seems like your phone is out of battery. Do you have cash?
Oh no, my battery's dead. Now I can't use my phone.
Alois glanced at me. In that moment, I knew I had been fooled again. Alois smirked unpleasantly. I realized immediately that she had deliberately let her phone die. In other words, she never intended to pay from the start.
Could you cover for me?
Again?
Come on, there are people waiting behind us.
Sure enough, the fast food place is packed with families. A long line of customers is waiting to check out behind me. I can't hold everyone up. I pull out my wallet, pay, and move on. Outside the restaurant, I ask Alois, you got lunch money from Mom, right? So you're going to pay me back.
I know.
I'm holding you to your promise. Make sure you pay me back. I reiterate, though not happily. Yet, that promise was never kept. True to form, or maybe just typical Alois, she found ways to dodge me. Eventually, my parents came home. They start recounting their travel stories, and my concern gets brushed aside. I am never eating out with her again. This time, I make a firm mental note. Sure, I could have talked to my brother about it, but I owe my freedom to him in many ways. If he hadn't become a doctor, I would have been subjected to intense studying. I can't worry him over something like this. Swallowing my frustration, I give in. After that, I take precautions to avoid being used by Alois. For example, I limit unnecessary conversations with her and spend more time at the office. I distance myself from her. My parents seem puzzled, but I brush it off. Should have done this from the start. I feel more at ease with fewer interactions with Alois. Then one day, as I got home, I see Mom handing Alois an envelope. What's going on? I ask Alois instantly. I'm concerned that Mom might be getting taken advantage of like I was. However, the reality seemed quite different.
This is the money I had your mom withdraw from the ATM for me.
For what?
I want to have dinner with Maya.
Oh, with me? A surprised me hears a somewhat lonely Alois continue.
We haven't had much time to talk recently, right? I've been feeling a bit lonely.
Ready to talk about dinner?
Yeah, I booked a fancy restaurant for tomorrow night. Is that okay with you?
Well, sure.
Great, my treat. Let's go eat together.
I find it hard to say no in front of my mom. If I did, she would think Alois and I weren't getting along. Especially if she knew money was making things awkward, she would worry. I don't want to cause her any stress, so I had no choice but to nod in agreement. The next evening, Alois insisted we take a taxi. She even specified an elegant lace dress, so the place has to be legit. A little anxious, we soon arrive at a luxury hotel.
How much is it?
Alois asks the driver as she reaches into her bag for that familiar envelope. I can cover the taxi fare. I interject. Alois puts the envelope back into her bag.
Are you sure? I was the one who invited you.
Yes, I'd feel bad if I didn't at least contribute this much. I have no obligation to pay the taxi, of course. But who knows what she would say later if she pays for everything. With that thought, I pay the taxi fare. We then proceed to a high-end French restaurant on the hotel's top floor. A place this upscale, are you sure?
I did make you pay a few times, so consider this an apology.
Alois smiles. If she really feels that way, she could just give me back the money. But today, Alois is treating me. I double-checked that envelope when we got out of the taxi, so she should definitely be covering the bill today. I felt reassured. Soon enough, the menu arrives. The $300 price tag does catch my eye, but the food is exceptional. The service is top-notch and I thoroughly enjoy the meal.
So how was it?
It was delicious. A meal worth $300 certainly feels luxurious.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Shall we head out?
Alois smiles and calls over the service staff. The server brings the bill discreetly. So this is how they settle accounts in a high-end place. While I am marveling at this, Alois takes out that familiar envelope from her bag. But the moment Alois opened the envelope, her face turned pale.
Uh-oh. The contents have been switched.
What Alois pulled out from the envelope was toy money. Showing it to me, she shamefully said,
I'm sorry, Maya. Carlos must have played a prank.
For the first time, I felt my blood run cold. I hadn't expected Alois to go to such lengths. You did bring your wallet, right?
I thought the money in the envelope would be enough, so I didn't bring it. What should we do?
Alois spoke in a conspicuously artificial tone. Was all of this planned? I was pretty angry, but I couldn't keep the staff waiting. Well, I guess I'll pay with my card.
I'm sorry, I was supposed to treat you.
There's nothing we can do now. Holding back my anger, I pulled out my card. On reflection, there had been several hints. Even when getting out of the taxi, Alois had shown that envelope. Going to a fancy place like this and bringing an envelope of cash was suspicious any way you looked at it. I should have realized something was off when she didn't switch the money to her wallet. I hated myself for not catching on to something so simple. However, based on past experiences, I figured it would be hard to get the money back from Alois. In the end, all I could master when I got home and told my family was, it was good. Of course, I wanted to get back at Alois, but there was nothing I could do. I even thought that maybe leaving home would solve everything. Maybe that's better than seeking revenge. That's when I started seriously considering living on my own. But setting up an independent life requires preparation. So for just a bit longer, I decided to put up with living with Alois until I could make this preparation. As I was thinking all this, a long holiday was approaching. My family would also be holding the 13th memorial service for my grandfather, so all my relatives would gather. It would be busy, but since my parents were taking days off, I figured there would be some time to talk. Then, on the day of the gathering, there was no time to have a leisurely conversation when all the relatives came together. Both adults and children were many, and being the host, I was super busy. In the midst of this, my mom asked, Maya, could you please go to the grocery store with the kids? Why? You know how boring adult gatherings are for kids. Why don't you go to the grocery store with them and buy some candy or something? I get it, but taking care of them all by myself will be a lot. I was saying this when suddenly a voice sounded from behind me. If that's the case, I'll go with you. Turning around, I saw Alois's mom, Lisa, standing there. Apparently, Lisa had worked as a nurse in the hospital around the same time as my grandfather, and she was here today for his memorial service. All right, I appreciate it. Then Lisa and I took a few kids to the nearby grocery store. I had only met Lisa once before at my brother's wedding. Knowing she's Aloysa's mom made me anxious. Still, I figured it was better than looking after a bunch of kids alone. Turns out Lisa was nothing like Alois. She made sure the kids walked on the sidewalk and kept quiet in the store. A very sensible person indeed. Alois could learn a thing or two from her mom. Of course, I kept that thought to myself, but I couldn't help wondering if Alois and Lisa were really mother and daughter. Eventually, the kids finished picking up their snacks and started lining up at the checkout. Both Lisa and I stood by watching them make their purchases. That's when it happened. Carlos, who was in line, suddenly made a fuss. "Forgot my wallet, can you pay for me?" he asked another kid who had come along. Lisa and I hurried over to Carlos. "What's the matter, Carlos? Didn't you bring any money?" Lisa asked. Carlos then pulled out his wallet and said, "I have money, but if I say I forgot it, people usually pay for me." "Why shouldn't you pay for it yourself?" "My mom always does it this way. She even did it when she went to a restaurant with my aunt." Upon hearing this, Lisa looked back at me. You're Maya, right? Is what Carlos is saying true?" "Well, yes. Generally speaking, I did end up paying when she said she forgot her wallet." "I see," Lisa quietly replied, but her face was beet red and she looked quite angry. In the end, Lisa managed to convince Carlos to settle down. Carlos obediently paid for his items and we left the grocery store. What came next was the real challenge. Prompted by Lisa, we all ended up running back home. As soon as we got back, Lisa burst into the room where all the relatives were gathered. "Alois, come here now." "Uh-huh. Mom?" "Sit down right here." "What's going on?" "Just come here quickly." In front of all the relatives, Lisa set Alois down. She began to question Carlos about what he had done at the grocery store. Alois visibly paled and started making excuses. That's not what happened." "What do you mean, not what happened? You had Maya pay, didn't you?" "Yes, I had her pay, but I paid her back." As Alois said this, Lisa looked at me. Seizing the opportunity, I blurted out, "She hasn't paid me back, not for the fancy restaurant or the fast food place, nothing at all." "What are you talking about, Maya? I did pay you back, see?" For some reason, Alois winked at me. Is she asking for help? But helping her now would only encourage her behavior. "No, you haven't. You owe me $10,000 and I haven't received a single dollar." I said it loud and clear. Immediately, all the relatives started to get angry. "How could you do this, Alois? Are you kidding me? Don't you feel ashamed?" Angry shouts filled the room. I later heard that among the people gathered for my grandfather, there were many of Alois's relatives. Faced with their collective scorn, Alois was silenced like a snuffed-out flame. Afterwards, Alois apologized to everyone. Finally, she came over with Lisa and said, "I'm sorry, Maya. I'll pay you back, I promise." "I understand. Just make sure you do." Alois continued to get an earful from Lisa. After that, Alois became much quieter around the house. She did pay me back, so I decided to let it go. However, my brother, who found out about all this, said he wanted to make it right. So I started looking for a place to live on my own. While doing so, Alois offered to cover my moving costs and 6 months of rent. It seems getting scolded by Lisa really got to her, but she still wanted to get back in my good graces. Well, I accepted what she was offering with gratitude. Now I have finished moving and I'm enjoying living on my own. I do feel a bit lonely sometimes, but I have no intention of going back home because I don't want to deal with Alois. So now I'm looking for a partner to share my life with.
Starting today, my sister will be living with us. It's all good news, so there's no reason to oppose it, right?
As soon as the move was finished, my husband strutted in, bringing his sister-in-law along. Indeed, as my husband said, my beloved grandfather had recently passed away. I was physically and emotionally drained from handling the funeral arrangements, sorting through his belongings, and most of all, the sudden loss of someone I loved dearly. The house where my grandfather lived, which I inherited as part of his estate, was where my husband suggested we move to. Just when I had finally finished moving in, my husband brought his sister-in-law without any discussion. A move so out of line that my love for him rapidly wilted. I'm Aurora. I graduated from the local university's pharmacy program and have been working as a pharmacist for 5 years. I met my husband, a fellow classmate, 2 years ago through a colleague at the hospital where I work. My husband, a full-time employee at a grocery store, has a generous nature. He had just broken up with a girlfriend from his student days and seemed heartbroken. I only had one boyfriend once in high school, and it didn't last long. Neither of us had much experience in love, but somehow that felt reassuring. Our different jobs meant our days off rarely aligned, but we still managed a smooth relationship, and we got married when he was promoted to chief at his workplace. After our marriage, we rented an apartment in a convenient part of the city and started living together. My parents died in an accident, and since high school, I'd been living with my grandfather in his house. The house was very old, creaking with every step, but for the past 6 months, with his worsening illness and frequent hospital visits, it had been mostly empty. It was an important house for me, too, filled with memories of my grandfather, and I still went back to clean it from time to time. Despite his exhaustion from the illness, my grandfather was overjoyed about my marriage. I can keep fighting this tough treatment now. I resolved to be truly happy, cherishing his words. Fortunately, I got along well with my husband's parents. They lived quite far away, so we might only meet a few times a year. You're always welcome to visit, they had said. I had a promising start to a happy married life. But there was one thing that worried me. My sister-in-law. She's a lively 19-year-old in her first year of university. Living away from her family home, she attends a university near our apartment. My husband chose our place, partly because it was close to the university his sister attended. They'd always been close, and she had expressed a desire for us to move nearby. Of course, it's good to be close with family, but I regretted not discussing it more when my husband practically decided on our living arrangement based on his sister's whims. 3 days after the move, on a weekend when I planned to finally sort through the remaining boxes, my husband brought my sister-in-law over unannounced. Caught off guard in casual clothes and no makeup, I was flustered. I couldn't just send her away, so I hurriedly cleared some space and had her sit in the living room. I had met her a few times while we were dating, but always with prior arrangement, and only when we were out, so I had been properly dressed. If I'd known she was coming, I would have dressed up, I said irritably to my husband, but decided to calm down in front of my sister-in-law.
Congratulations on your marriage. Please take good care of my brother,
my sister-in-law said, handing me a paper bag. Inside was baked goods from a famous bakery. You didn't have to go to such trouble. If I try to return the favor, it'll cost me a fortune, my husband said, peeking inside and laughing carelessly, but I was inwardly tense. As my husband said, my sister-in-law was quite a spendthrift. With her expensive clothes and accessories, she seemed too young for such luxury items. I had subtly asked my husband if she might be involved in something dubious, but he changed his expression instantly when it came to my sister-in-law. She wouldn't do anything like that, but I'm worried, so I'll offer to help her out financially if she's struggling, he said. My sister-in-law supposedly receiving a monthly allowance from her parents. I heard it from my mother-in-law herself, and she even told me how much, so I don't think it's a lie. Despite receiving enough money to live comfortably without any luxury, separate from tuition, my sister-in-law is currently also receiving an allowance from my husband. When I said it's all too indulgent, my husband argued back, and it turned into a heated argument. I could somewhat understand his concern for his sister, but I was also displeased, because there were times he'd send my sister-in-law expensive purses and accessories every month, and even go to her apartment to cook for her. But aside from that, he was a kind husband who willingly did household chores, so that was my only concern about him. The problem lies with my sister-in-law herself. My sister-in-law, it seems, doesn't think highly of me and acts condescending. I guess in her world, where her parents and brother dance to her tune, I must seem like an obstacle.
Aurora as a wife type was unexpected. My brother used to date mostly beautiful women like models. Aurora, you are, how should I say, more plain. There's a difference between who you date and who you marry, right? Hope he doesn't cheat on you. Aurora, you're a pharmacist, right? So you must earn a good salary. Why don't you dress more fashionably? You were such a nerdy student, only good at studying, weren't you? She whispers these endless snide remarks when my husband isn't around. She's essentially a 19-year-old kid, and it's exhausting to deal with her seriously. There were times I thought about telling my husband, especially when she was persistent. But he dotes on my sister-in-law and could easily imagine it would only lead to more trouble. Since her harassment was limited to mean comments, I decided to keep it to myself and not tell anyone. Besides, we're in for a long relationship, and trying to get along in a hurry would only backfire, so I thought it'd be better to gradually deepen our relationship without taking it too seriously. Just a few days ago, my sister-in-law, who I'd met recently, came over again without notice. But at that time, my husband hadn't returned home yet, and I was preparing for my afternoon shift. The cafeteria was crowded, so I thought I'd come over for lunch. I brought some friends too, is that okay? Suppressing the urge to shout at her unreasonable behavior, I managed to send her and her classmates, who were standing beside her, home while keeping my composure. I don't know how she narrated the incident, but during my evening shift, I received several calls from my husband.
Turning away hungry kids? Are you out of your mind? If you were busy, you could have at least given them some money. My sister called to say she was embarrassed in front of her friends.
I don't know if this was the trigger, but I started noticing a change in my husband's attitude around this time. The household chores, which we had agreed to share since we both work, gradually stopped being done by him, and as I couldn't stand things being left for days, I ended up doing everything, and it became solely my burden. His easygoing nature, which I had admired, turned out to be just sloppiness. His newly acquired hobbies would quickly be abandoned and gather dust, which was a common occurrence. When his hobby stuff started cluttering not only his room, but also the dining table and car, I had to speak up. But he just ignored it and didn't deal with it. I feel like even his interest in me is fading because I'm always nagging. He's so neglectful, but when it comes to my sister-in-law, it's different. My sister-in-law's unannounced visits continued, and she would eat our food and torment me without any pretense. Initially, she did this behind my husband's back, but recently, knowing he's on her side, she openly makes snide remarks. She criticizes the food I make.
This seasoning is too strong. Are you really a pharmacist? Are you deliberately making people sick with weird food so they'll buy your drugs? Bro, you better watch out. She would make these terrible jokes, insulting even my profession, and my husband would just laugh along. And every time she would wheedle a considerable amount of money from him, not just pocket change. I'm running low on living expenses. Or, I want to buy textbooks for college. I can understand, but I want to buy a birthday present for a friend. Now that's just her own convenience. Moreover, she drags my husband along for shopping and makes him buy expensive brand items. When I point this out, of course,
"It's my right to spend my own money,"
he snaps back, making any conversation futile. My husband, unaware, doesn't see my sister-in-law laughing at me, getting everything she asks for while his wife gets nothing. Whenever I try to address anything with my sister-in-law, she immediately turns on the waterworks and melodramatically seeks my husband's help. His falling for such poor acting is beyond saving. I realize too late that my husband has an extreme fondness for his sister. His belief in everything my sister-in-law says and lecturing me is laughably pathetic and enough to kill any affection. But my sister-in-law, now in her third year, will soon be busy with job hunting and senior paper writing, so I decided to endure it a little longer. I hoped that after graduating, she'd quickly get married and her mean streak would calm down somewhat. Yet, what hit me hardest wasn't my husband or my sister-in-law, but the death of my beloved grandfather. With no grandparents or parents left, I inherited his estate. I thought about demolishing the house, which held beautiful memories, but my husband stopped me.
"We should live in this magnificent house as a couple,"
he suggested. My grandfather, who had a long hospital stay in his later years, hardly knew my husband. His desire to keep this house was unexpected, and I was overjoyed at that moment. My grandfather was gone, but I could return to this house. The bubble burst just a few months later. During a pre-move inspection, we found that only the plumbing needed repairs. My grandfather cherished this house he built in his youth, and the contractor even commented on its good condition for its age. The creaking floors bothered me, but I thought we could remodel when we started a family. I cleaned the rooms in between work and sorted my grandfather's belongings. Once everything was packed and ready, I proceeded with the movers, thinking my husband had stepped out to the nearby grocery store when he disappeared without a word. I was surprised when he didn't return by departure time and responded curtly to my frantic calls to go ahead without him. Confused but not wanting to delay the movers, I headed to my grandfather's house first. I finally saw my husband after all the moving and paperwork are done, standing beside my sister-in-law. An uneasy feeling hit me right away, and it proved right when my husband dropped a bombshell. From today, it's the three of us living here. The house is big, and Aurora, you'd be lonely with just the two of us, right? It's cruel to have my sister live in a small apartment every month, and this is perfect timing. Aurora, you'll support her job search, won't you? What? Why would you decide that on your own? This is my grandfather's house. You should have consulted me first. It wouldn't matter if I did, right? The house will be livelier, and my sister can focus on her studies and job hunting. What's the problem? To be clear, it is a problem. We'll talk about this in detail later. So can you leave for today? I was exhausted from handling the funeral and moving preparations alone for months. I had no mental energy to speak to someone who casually mentioned living in this house after my grandfather's death as good timing. But my husband just yelled, not caring at all. What right do you have to say that? If you don't like living together, then you can leave. I proposed this thinking it was a good idea, and now you're talking down to me. I'd feel refreshed if you were gone. I won't tolerate anyone who treats my precious family badly. I was shocked by his words, as if he didn't consider me family at all. But I decided there was no need to seriously engage with such ridiculous people, and chose to stay calm. So what? Are you saying I should leave? Meaning we should divorce? I just want to confirm, so you can't claim you were tricked later. This house is mine by inheritance. The rights to this house are... Since we're divorcing, it'll come to a distribution of property, right? The house is a substantial inheritance. Are you saying just because your grandpa owned it, it's all yours? Look, the world doesn't revolve around you. I'm a rightful ex-husband, so I have a claim to half. I'll pay you for your half, so just leave. What my husband interrupted to say was utterly nonsensical.
Aurora, you're always so stingy with money. You earn well yourself, but always want too much. You should be kinder to someone younger, you know, Auntie. You might think of me as a frivolous young girl, but girls need money. On the contrary, you always dress so plainly, wear heavy makeup. What do you even spend your money on? You've completely given up being a woman. It's pathetic. My sister-in-law, having completely won my husband over, joined him in accusing me. Seeing this, I completely lost any affection for them both, and just wanted to leave as soon as possible. So I told them I would go. The rights to the house are no longer an issue, but are you sure? I want to confirm properly. The siblings seemed briefly puzzled by how easily things were resolved, but then they began smirking again. Trying to unsettle us was so obvious. Such a sore loser. Well, I appreciate that you agreed to divorce. Here, sign this and leave. My husband threw the pre-filled divorce papers at me. I was so fed up that I was relieved it was happening quickly. Talk about sour grapes. Sorry, I'm more loved than you, Aurora. When you remarry, maybe try being a bit more feminine.
They laughed together, so I sighed heavily and picked up the divorce papers. Hearing that, my sister-in-law started to confront me again, so I turned to my husband. You're so clueless, poor thing. Your wicked sister plans to kick you out soon, too. Instead of laughing, why don't you two have a proper fight? What? What are you talking about? My husband looked utterly foolish, still tilting his head. But my sister-in-law, perhaps due to her youth, couldn't keep a poker face and looked frozen. She seemed to come to her senses when my husband called her name.
What are you saying, old lady? I would never do such a thing.
But my sister-in-law's obvious panic seemed to unsettle my husband. Thinking I could turn the tables here, I forgot my tiredness and kindly explained. I overheard it by chance at a bar right in front of the university. You were too obsessed with your sister to come home, and I was too tired from all the paperwork and procedures to cook. I went out to eat with a friend to refresh. I took up my cell phone and played a recorded conversation.
Since my brother's wife's grandpa passed away, I'll soon get that house. She is honestly annoying, but my brother is on my side. He does anything I say. It's funny, right? After I helped him when he was bullied by a guy friend of mine, he's been like that ever since. Well, he's got money, so I plan to use him well and take the house. No rent, lots of rooms. It's perfect. I want to live there together, so once I get the house, I'll just extract money from him and kick him out. Probably no problem. I think the old lady will get desperate if my brother mentions the house as a condition for divorce. Fortunately, I was seated nearby, so despite the noisy restaurant, the recording was clear. Initially, I started recording out of curiosity when they began bad-mouthing not just me, but also my husband. However, as they got drunker and more excited, they began discussing the worst plans, and that's when I unexpectedly caught them red-handed. I decided not to tell my husband about this immediately, waiting to see what he would do. Sadly, he fell for my sister-in-law's manipulation and presented me with divorce, which I agreed to. I had confirmed that my sister-in-law was at that table when I went to the restroom and returned. My husband stared at my sister-in-law with a shaking voice and a pale face. My sister-in-law, after looking down for a while, suddenly raised her face, red with anger, and protested.
This is fabrication. It's too convenient to be in the same restaurant. You don't even know my boyfriend, and it's creepy to assume based on seeing someone who looks a bit like him. And even if this really is me, it's crazy to spy on me like this. Stop playing detective and dragging people into it. Seeing she still had some fight left, I resumed playing the rest of the recording. The sound of boots clattering towards the restroom, seemingly from a drunk person. Then a man's voice on the phone, talking to a woman in a cloying tone. He referred to my sister-in-law as an ATM, saying she would get him a house from the ATM's family. The man bragged about my sister-in-law gifting him whatever he asked for, and giving him money since she wasn't working. My sister-in-law had been funneling the branded gifts she received from my husband to this boyfriend, along with money from her part-time job. Initially, I felt sorry for my sister-in-law being played, but now the situation was different. She was scheming behind my back, planning to involve my grandfather's house, so she deserved what was coming. After the playback, my sister-in-law was in a daze, with no energy left to claim mistaken identity, confirming for my husband that she was indeed the woman talking with the man. Having said all I needed, I was about to leave, when my husband grabbed my hand from behind.
Wait, you see now, right, Aurora? I was just being deceived. Let's cancel the divorce and live together as promised.
What? No need to cancel. I want the divorce too. Besides, your dear sister is crying. Take care of her until the end. I smiled brightly at my husband, feeling liberated, and quickly left with my minimal belongings. I filed the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized. I wanted to enjoy a relaxed single life, but things weren't that simple. My ex-husband was squatting in my grandfather's house, refusing to leave. Not wanting to interact, I had a lawyer explain that the estate wasn't subject to distribution of property.
So what does distribution of property mean then? No rights for the husband?
But he was unaccepting. I consulted my in-laws, who I'd been in regular contact with. They came over like a whirlwind, confronting my ex-husband and my sister-in-law in both my grandfather's house and my sister-in-law's apartment, scolding them thoroughly. My father-in-law is apparently quite intimidating when angry, and my mother-in-law later told me with a laugh how the siblings were shaking. I began to understand why my ex-husband was reluctant to visit his parents' house. The in-laws apologized deeply for the divorce, but I explained it wasn't their fault, and I wasn't holding any grudges. I changed my phone number and email address, asking my mother-in-law not to share them with my ex-husband. I think my ex-husband was desperate for the inheritance because he probably had no savings. When we got married, I suggested opening a new bank account for joint savings, but he refused. He couldn't save due to student loans, cell phone bills, hobbies, and giving large sums to my sister-in-law. So we decided to save separately. I had investments, so I didn't have much cash on hand and couldn't give him any money anyway. Through the lawyer, I told him there would be no distribution of property in exchange for not claiming the divorce bond. Since he signed the papers under my father-in-law's pressure, I intend to enforce it strictly. Eventually, my ex-husband and my sister-in-law, who had been wasting my money, were taken back to their parents' house. My ex-husband quit his job, and my sister-in-law left the school to work as a junior employee in a relative's company. They're being reformed through hard physical work and cry every day. My mother-in-law sent me a picture of my ex-husband with a slimmed-down figure from the labor, but I felt no thrill. My sister-in-law tried to charm her superiors with her youth and beauty, but being a relative of the boss, she got no attention. Her long, shiny nails were gone, and she was now doing a wonderful job digging in the dirt. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying peaceful days in my nature-filled grandfather's house. Though I miss him, looking through the organized albums brings me back to those times. I'm thinking of inviting dear friends over for parties in this warm home,
watched over by my grandfather.
My name is Karen. I'm a 30-year-old female taxi driver at 5.4 feet and 171 pounds. I'm what you'd call chubby. I'm significantly over the standard weight, but I have no health issues. People often tell me, "Karen, it's such a waste. You'd be pretty if you lost weight." But if I'd be pretty if I slimmed down, I guess I'm decent enough as I am. So, well, I'm oddly optimistic and not at all interested in dieting. In high school, I was in the volleyball club. I was the type called a sporty chubby. I wasn't this heavy back when I played volleyball. I gained weight rapidly because I stopped exercising and didn't change my eating habits after graduating high school. After high school, I got my car and motorcycle licenses, bought a 150cc bike with the money I earned from part-time jobs, and spent about a year traveling around America. Later, I took up another part-time job, bought a used car, gathered camping gear, and traveled around America again. Instead of spending money on diets and fashion, I find more joy in traveling on my bike or car, watching movies I like, or reading books. In short, I suppose I lack what people call femininity. At 23, I decided to settle down and become a taxi driver. I love customer service and, of course, driving, so I think this job is my calling. Now, I'm dating a man. His name is Daniel. He's 27, 3 years my junior, and works at a major automotive company. He's quite handsome. Some might find it unbelievable that a chubby 30-year-old woman can date a younger, handsome man, but, surprisingly, I'm quite popular. Some men say a woman over 110 pounds isn't a woman, while others don't care much about that. Daniel was one of the latter. We met when Daniel was a passenger in my taxi, on his first day inspecting dealerships from the headquarters. He liked my driving and customer service. While some passengers don't like to be talked to, Daniel is chatty. "It must be hard being a woman, isn't it?" he said. "Well, yeah. Some say they're afraid of getting into a car driven by a woman, while others prefer it to be the stuffy old men drivers. It has its pros and cons. But now, with dash cams and all, women can work with a sense of security." I've had this conversation countless times. We chatted casually and reached the destination in about 20 minutes. Then Daniel, while paying the fare, asked, "Can I charter the taxi? I need to visit several places in the city tomorrow, and catching a taxi each time seems troublesome." "Sure you can. Just call the company, and we'll pick you up whenever you specify," I replied. Then Daniel said, "Actually, I'd like to request you specifically, if that's okay." "Of course, that's fine," I smiled and answered. The next day, we started from a business hotel and spent almost the entire day together, visiting car dealerships around the city. Due to our jobs, we never ran out of things to talk about, from cars to traffic conditions, accidents, and hobbies. "Traveling around America on a motorcycle, huh? That's impressive. I know solo camping is getting popular, but you've been camping alone long before it became a thing," he said, showing interest in my stories. Eventually, he moved to the passenger seat to make conversation easier, and almost felt like a date. By the time we finished visiting the last dealership, we had become quite close. "Can I contact you again?" he asked. "Sure, just call the company and request me, and I'll be there," I responded. Daniel, slightly embarrassed, then said, "I mean, not for work, but privately. Can we exchange contact information?" So I happily exchanged numbers with Daniel. That's how my relationship with him started. Talking with Karen is fun, and being with her is so comfortable. "I'm not really into overly feminine women," Daniel said. I sort of understood, and sort of didn't. Was it my lack of femininity that he had fallen for? At the time, that's what I thought. After dating for a while, "If I were to marry someone, it'd be you, Karen. Will you marry me?" Daniel said. By then I had fallen so deeply for Daniel, so I had no reason to say no. It wasn't a passionate proposal, but somehow it was very much like Daniel, and I liked it. That was when I learned that Daniel's biological parents had died in a car accident when he was in high school, and that he is now adopted by his uncle, Richard. I still can't bring myself to call them Dad or Mom, he said with a sad smile. Hearing about Daniel's heavy past, I'll definitely make you happy, Daniel. No, we'll make each other happy. I impulsively hugged him tight. Ugh, Karen, too strong, he said, laughing. Both of us were a bit teary-eyed. Sorry, but I think Richard's family might oppose our marriage. But I'm determined to marry Karen, Daniel said. Is that so? Because I'm older? Because I'm a taxi driver without a college degree? Or is it because I'm chubby? I don't feel inferior about these things, but I listed what society might criticize. No, I think they'd oppose anyone I chose. They aren't my biological parents, and I think I could force acceptance by moving out and living on my own first. Daniel reasoned, though it didn't sound like a great plan to me. No, we'll go and meet them properly. Even if they're not your biological parents, Daniel has been taken care of by them, and they'll be relatives. I'd prefer to get married with their blessing. So, we set a date to visit Daniel's house for introductions. I was optimistic, thinking everything would work out. But as Daniel predicted, I faced stronger opposition than I imagined. Meanwhile, my parents were all for the marriage, raising their hands in approval when I brought Daniel home. We're getting married. I never thought she'd get married, and is such a wonderful man too. Mom teared up. Are you sure about her? Dad asked, making a typically problematic parent comment. The manliest one in our house is Karen, my two younger brothers testified. We all laughed, drank, had an incredibly good time. You have a nice family, Daniel said as we were leaving, looking a bit sad, which tugged at my heart. On the day we were to visit Daniel's house, I put extra effort into my makeup and dressed in a formal suit. I'm sorry. This might be uncomfortable for you, Daniel said apologetically. It's okay. I have a pretty tough heart, I replied with a smile, and we entered his house. The door was opened by a slightly neurotic middle-aged man and a beautiful middle-aged woman. They seemed like a kind and ordinary couple, Richard and his wife, but their grimacing smiles at seeing me bothered me. Once we were led into the living room, a young woman was seated on the sofa. She was incredibly beautiful, the kind of beauty that's undeniable. I honestly thought, she's so pretty. I'm jealous. But she glared at me with intensity. This is Karen. We're planning to get married, Daniel introduced. As everyone took their seats, I greeted. I'm Karen. Pleased to meet you. Suddenly, the beautiful woman burst out. What's so good about her? She said. Her name is Jennifer, the only daughter of this household. She's 22 years old, a cousin to Daniel. When Jennifer was 12, Daniel, who lost his parents in an accident, came to live in this house. He's her younger cousin, and though they lived together, he never felt more than brotherly affection for her. But it seemed Jennifer has always liked Daniel. Jennifer, that's rude, isn't it? If you want to know Karen's good points, I can tell you plenty. Daniel interjected, seemingly annoying Jennifer. What good points? Her personality? No matter how nice she is, she's still a chubby, older woman. It's crazy for you to marry someone like her, Daniel, Jennifer exclaimed, distorting her beautiful face. Your opposition doesn't matter, Jennifer. I've already decided to marry her, Daniel replied calmly. But then even Aunt Nancy joined in. Look, Daniel, isn't she a bit too overweight? I'd be embarrassed to introduce her to the relatives, she said. Even Richard added, the relatives all think Daniel and Jennifer would end up together. Imagine the ridicule if they find out he's marrying an overweight woman. They all treated me as the overweight woman. This is pointless. No matter how much Richard and the others oppose, I'm marrying Karen. We've done our duty by visiting. Let's go, Karen, Daniel said, taking my hand as we headed to the door. There aren't any wedding dresses for overweight women anyway, Jennifer's voice echoed behind us. I'm really sorry. I didn't expect it to be that bad, Daniel said, more shocked than me, apologizing repeatedly. It felt like a skit, didn't it? I was more bewildered than shocked, even finding it a little funny. Richard and Nancy must really adore Jennifer. She's indeed a great beauty. If it were just about looks, anyone would choose Jennifer, I said nonchalantly. Daniel sighed and replied, You're really something, Karen. If they had been Daniel's biological family and sister, I might have been much more upset. I never wanted a wedding or a reception. I've never fantasized about getting married, and attending friends' weddings only reinforced my desire never to have a reception. I find it an embarrassingly public event. However, my parents pleaded, "We want you to do something feminine just once in your life." And as a compromise, we decided to just have the wedding ceremony, which is incredibly depressing to me. On a particularly gloomy day, an event occurred that sunk me deeper into gloom. A request came in from a brand shop for a driver, specifying a female driver. "Karen, this one's for you," I was told over the radio. When I arrived, I found Jennifer waiting with a large branded shopping bag. Surprised, but not showing it. "Thank you for choosing our service. Where would you like to go?" I greeted. "Really? Driving a taxi? For a woman?" She scoffed, with a remark that almost demanded an apology to all female taxi drivers. "I don't have any particular place in mind. Can you just drive around the area?" It seemed her real goal was just to ride in my car. Through the rearview mirror, Jennifer was, as always, very beautiful. For about 30 minutes, I endured her relentless harassment, complaints, and one-sided confessions about her feelings for Daniel. If it weren't for my job, I would have snapped back. But somehow, I held my tongue and dropped her off. After finishing my shift and returning to the company, I was greeted with a complaint from the customer. It was an intense complaint, filled with fabrications about my service attitude. I can't believe she'd go that far just to harass me. I was exacerbated, but glad I hadn't retaliated in the taxi. The company, knowing my usual work attitude and positive customer feedback, suspected the customer was a problem from the start. The whole exchange was recorded on the drive recorder, quickly convincing the company that the complaint was baseless. But Jennifer's obsession with Daniel seemed a little bit abnormal. Perhaps having someone she looked down on take away the person she liked triggered her extreme behavior. But I was determined to be happy with Daniel, no matter what. On the day of the wedding, I wore a dress for the first time in my life. Jennifer said all that stuff, so I was a bit worried about the size, but "You look really beautiful, Karen," Daniel complimented me. "There are various wedding dresses for chubby brides these days," I replied, laughing off his concern. Moreover, I had attempted dieting for the first time for this day, successfully losing 11 pounds. Additionally, with wedding beauty treatments and shapewear for the dress, I, who had always been told I'd be pretty if I slimmed down, ended up looking quite decent, to say it myself. Even my family was almost creeped out, saying I looked like a different person. That's when Richard and his wife entered the dressing room, bringing along Jennifer in a wedding dress. Daniel, my family, and I were all momentarily baffled by the scene. Jennifer, in her wedding dress, was undeniably beautiful, and my brothers were whispering to each other, "Who is this beauty? Is this going to be a showdown?" they said. Daniel was the first to react to this outrageous act. "Richard! Nancy! What on earth are you doing?" His anger was palpable, chilling the air. But Richard, undeterred, "Jennifer is more suitable as a bride than Karen. Overweight woman, leave!" he shouted. It was unbelievable. "Daniel, I'm beautiful, right? Please choose me over her," Jennifer pleaded with tearful eyes. She was indeed beautiful. I acknowledged that. My parents were panicked. Mom hurriedly came to me, almost crying. "What's going on, Karen? What's all this?" Dad was slightly turning red and then pale. "Richard, Nancy, I never thought you'd be this foolish," Daniel began. "I didn't want to say this, but it seems necessary. Everyone, this might be a dull story, but please, listen. When my parents died in an accident, a considerable amount of insurance money and compensation for pain and suffering was paid. I'm grateful that you took me in as an adoptive son, Richard. But at that time, wasn't your company struggling financially?" As Daniel spoke calmly, Richard's face turned red. "What are you saying out of the blue? Are you suggesting I took you in for money?" he shouted. "I wouldn't go that far, but it's the fact that your company recovered afterward, right? That was just coincidental timing." His agitation made it clear Daniel was not mistaken. I couldn't help but interject. "I get it. That's why you're going to such extremes to stop our marriage, right? If Jennifer and Daniel got married, you thought you wouldn't have to return the money, right? It seemed I had hit the nail on the head.
Damn! No! We purely thought about Jennifer. What's wrong with wanting her to marry the man she loves?
Richard defensively exclaimed. In a way, Jennifer was also a victim, though I couldn't feel any sympathy.
Why would you choose an overweight woman over Jennifer, who's so beautiful?
He seemed to genuinely believe that. Maybe to Richard, a woman's worth is all in her appearance. Thinking if they aren't young and beautiful, they are valueless. Maybe it's because Richard raised Jennifer this way that things have turned out like this. I heard from Daniel that you often tell your wife she was beautiful when she was younger. That's not really a compliment, is it? I thought the root of all this was Richard. Daniel opened up. I've been distrusting of women for a long time. Living in Richard's house, I was constantly subjected to Nancy and Jennifer's derogatory remarks about other women. Always about their looks. Even if those women had great achievements, they'd say, "But she's not even pretty," and laugh. It was awful. That's why Daniel had said I don't like overly feminine women. He was referring to Jennifer and the likes. But Karen made me realize that not all women are like that. That's why I'm marrying her. I now understood why Daniel chose me. Hearing that she contributed to his distrust, Jennifer looked visibly pale. Far from having any affection for me, this was the first time she realized she was disliked. At that moment, Nancy spoke up. Yeah, he always says I was beautiful when young, but now I'm just an old lady. It's like he's justifying his affair with younger women. The room froze at her bombshell.
What? Nancy! What are you saying all of a sudden?
You think I don't know? Dad's been having affairs? Caught off guard by Nancy's sudden attack, Daniel, my family, and I just watched the family's argument unfold. When things finally quieted down, Daniel said, I won't ask for the embezzled money back. Richard is my uncle, and I owe him. But I'm leaving that house. Karen and I will be happy together. He took my hand. Let's go then, he said. Right. It doesn't feel like a wedding anymore. We've worn the dress, taken pictures. That's enough. We'll personally apologize to the guests who were supposed to attend. Richard will handle the last-minute cancellation fees. Without further ado, we left the dressing room. Afterward, we submitted our marriage registration and officially became husband and wife. We visited Daniel's parents' graves. Dad, Mom, I want to introduce you. This is Karen. I've married her. We'll be happy together. So please, rest easy. Daniel introduced me to his parents like that. Hello, I'm Karen. Please look after us. I bowed my hands together. Even after deducting the amount Richard embezzled and the wedding cancellation fees, a significant sum of money remained with Daniel. It was the money his parents had left for him. We decided to use it as a down payment to purchase a condominium to live in together. After the hectic days of various procedures and moving, we settled down and invited my family to our new home for a small family-only party.
Man, Karen was so cool at that time. Really impressive. It's not all about looks, for women or men, said my cheerful brothers. But that girl and her mother are a bit pitiful, aren't they? They're so beautiful, after all.
Mom seemed a bit sympathetic. Mom, you've been charming always, before and now, Dad said, carefully making everyone laugh. We later heard that Richard and his wife were constantly fighting over whether to divorce or not. Apparently one of his mistresses, emboldened after being discovered, confronted them saying, I'm obviously better than that old lady. But that's no longer any of our concern. Jennifer, it seems, turned to overeating due to stress and gained about 44 pounds. She's not thinking that gaining weight will win Daniel back, is it? No, surely not. If that's the case, she still hasn't understood. It's not about looks. I believe it's good for a woman to want to be beautiful. However, looking down on others or adopting a superior attitude because of beauty is wrong. Looks fade with age. What remains then? The beauty of the heart is a treasure that doesn't fade with age. We canceled our wedding at the last minute and didn't have a reception, but we're planning our honeymoon. Yes, we haven't gone on our honeymoon yet. We plan to take the maximum annual leave
and drive around Europe in a car. We debated between a motorcycle and a car, but chose the latter, since Daniel doesn't have a motorcycle license, and we can cover more distance by taking turns driving. I can't wait. Someday, I'd like to go camping as a family, Daniel said as he hugged me. We will definitely be happy. No, we already are happy. Even an overweight woman can find happiness.